Hello and welcome to One Mother Artist. Today I'm going to show you how to paint roses in 4 different ways. I'm using my Moleskine watercolor notebook sketchbook, size A5. I'm using watercolors from Artistic Isle Watercolors. They're handmade paints. So I am dipping my brush into my alizarin crimson and using the tip of the brush, I'm making C curves. I start off with my brush pretty tall, and then I start to angle my brush to make these beautiful fat C curves. I'm grabbing a little bit more water to water down the pigment. Now this looks sloppy right now, and you know what? That is totally okay. I want you guys to be able to paint flowers in any way that you want. When I first started, I got frustrated because I wasn't copying what I was seeing. So this is the second way. Basically, I just made a bunch of round scribbles, and I'm starting to add in some C curves. I'm holding my brush at about a 45-degree angle there, and as I flatten my brush out, I'm using the belly or the full entire part of the brush. I'm just making C curves and circles all around this rose. I'm trying to leave some negative space so that way we can see the folds of each petal. Now these are supposed to be loose florals. They are not painted in a realistic manner. I'm going back into my alizarin crimson, it's my favorite color, and the brush I'm using is a size 8 round. So here I am, I made like a little upside down 6 or a 9, and I'm just making sure I'm connecting each C curve. And if you saw in the beginning, my brush was more vertical. So now instead of using the brush to turn, I am actually turning my sketchbook. And you know what? That is totally okay. There's no one way to paint flowers. So here I turned it and I'm leaving some negative space, and in this style I'm trying to connect each one of my C curves intentionally back to the last petal. This is not sped up, this is in real time. I'm dipping my brush back in again, and this is the 4th rose. So I'm making some C's, very dark, and just kind of combining all the 3 methods I just showed you. Again, I'm using the belly of the brush. Personally here, I think I went a little too like U-y instead of C shape, but that's fine because it's just paint, it's just water. And it's all about having fun and experimenting. I personally like using a lot of glazing. Glazing's a fancy term for just going over dried watercolor. Now, if you look, you can see in the first one, I'm going to go back, and that's semi-dry. This paper dries very fast. It's not a very heavyweight paper. And I love the blooms that I'm seeing here. And I'm using the blooms to guide me as to where I'm going to put in the darker colors to show just the hints of the folds of the flower. I'm going back in again, wetting my brush. I don't want it to be too thick of a paint, but I want it to be heavily pigmented. I'm tracing pretty much over the lines, making sure to leave the negative space there. And really defining where I feel there are petals. You may feel when you do this that they are somewhere else, and that's totally okay. Again, I'm just going over the center. The center of the rose is always going to be the darkest part of your flower. The paint here is a little wet, so I'm getting some wonderful bleeds, and that's what watercolor does. Watercolor moves and it flows. Here I'm going back in, going around the center, and I really want you to play with the paint and your paper and just see what kind of marks that you like, where you feel like they need to be, because this is your sketchbook or your piece of paper. So now I'm going to take a magic eraser, which I did not discover until recently, the magic of magic eraser. It pretty much cleans up everything unless it's dirty, like mine. So right now I'm doing a technique that's called lifting that you can actually use in your painting to lift off the dirty paint water, and a rag to soak up the paint. I did not rub it, I just dabbed it. So I'm grabbing some water onto my size 8 round brush, and I'm getting, I believe it's Perylene Green. And I'm showing you how to make leaves in a couple of different ways. So I made a straight line, and then I am using the full of my brush, starting with the very tip and pushing all the way down and then lifting up to get that fine point. Having that white line in the middle allows negative space to show the vein of the leaf. Then I dropped in some color, some more pigment, and let the watercolor do its thing. So for these ones, I am doing the same exact technique, except for I didn't leave a white line in between. Again, I'm dropping in color, maybe going down the center of the leaf. I chose Perylene Green because green and red are complementary colors, and yes, leaves are green, but it's a little darker, a little moodier, has maybe a little bit more blue to it. Again, I left the line, I used the line as a guide, and left the negative space. I like painting leaves in different ways, even if it's for the same plant or if it's for different flowers. I just feel like it gives you so much texture and character. And then I love these little dashes. And again, it's just putting my paintbrush down and lifting it up very quickly, maybe not as heavily as when I'm making a leaf. And leaves grow in different stages, and this could be a vine, it could be a rose bush, I don't know, but giving just the indications of where there's some greenery, and it just mixes up the pattern enough so that it's not just flat leaves. So you can see now, as our flowers are drying, all the different layers that we put down are drying, and it's really coming together. So if we judge this piece on the beginning, kind of a hot mess, but as you paint along, your painting will come together. I paint with all 4 of these styles. I paint in other styles with roses. You just need to find the one that suits yourself. Again, as an artist, I was getting very frustrated because I couldn't replicate the artist that I saw on YouTube. And I just decided, a friend said to me, she's like, I love the way you paint flowers. And I decided, I'm going to paint flowers the way I want to paint them. So I'm going back in here, adding some more glazing in. That is the biggest struggle as an artist, knowing when to stop. Sometimes you just don't know when to stop. So I always use a paint towel as opposed to a white towel, a paper towel, because it's washable, especially with watercolor. Now I'm doing that technique lifting. So I wanted some more white space. So I went in with a wet brush, dabbed it a little bit, and then went in and pretty much picked up the color with my brush. So as you can see, I wet my brush, I dabbed it, picked up some color, I'm cleaning it off onto my towel, and then I'm going back in with some color just to define the shadows and the highlights and where those lines need to be. In hindsight, when I was doing this, that flower to me looked just too one tone. Your painting needs to have value. Your flowers need to have value. Value is the same color that is from light to dark. So in watercolor, we tend not to use the color white. We use more water. So the more water you have on your pigment, the lighter the color it's going to be. But it's still alizarin crimson. I have not added another color into the flowers at all. I am pulling from the same full pan. And to me, that's one of the joys of working with watercolor. Sometimes I do add white to colors, but for flowers, I tend not to. My abstracts, I do tend to use more opaque watercolors at times. So now I'm taking a little bit of, I believe it is yellow, and all these colors are made by Artistic Isle watercolors. I will put a link into the description. They're handmade, and they are just creamy and delicious and wonderful, and little packets of joy. Little packets of joy come to you in the mail. So I'm filling in the negative space. Again, negative space is the space that's left over, what's in between. And sometimes you might look at that and be like, Sarah, it's totally fine without it. I felt like it just needed a little something. So I chose a really pale yellow, and that's pretty much it. Thank you guys for watching. Be sure to click subscribe and give me a thumbs up. Thank you guys so much. Bye.